Sir, what is our price? A dark western tale. The year was 1881, and Jake Morrison was trying to forget who he had been. 12 years earlier, Jake had fought in the Civil War. He was only 19 when he enlisted in the Confederate Army, believing he was fighting for something noble. But the war taught Jake only one lesson: there is no nobility in death, only blood, mud, and regret. After the war, Jake returned home to Tennessee and discovered there was no home left. His farm had been burned down, his parents killed by raiders. His younger sister Sarah had disappeared without a trace. With nothing left to lose, Jake went west. He became a bounty hunter, using his soldier skills to track down criminals. He was good at it. Too good. In 6 years, Jake had captured or killed 42 men, but each face began to haunt him. Each shot fired, each life taken, weighed on his conscience, until one day, Jake simply stopped. He returned his bounty hunter badge and decided he would never kill anyone again. Now, at 35 years old, Jake was just a lonely cowboy. He worked on ranches temporarily, earned enough for food and whiskey, and moved on. Always moving on, running from his ghosts. But Jake wasn't completely alone. 3 years ago, Jake had found an abandoned dog in the desert near Santa Fe. It wasn't a common breed. It looked like a mix of wolf and shepherd dog. Fur black as coal, penetrating yellow eyes, and an almost human intelligence in its gaze. The dog was injured, with a steel trap caught on its hind leg. Jake could have moved on. It wasn't his problem. But something in those yellow eyes made him stop. He dismounted and carefully freed the animal from the trap. The dog growled but didn't bite. It seemed to understand that Jake was trying to help. "Easy there, friend," Jake murmured, treating the wound with water and clean rags. "You'll be fine." The dog watched him with those strange, intelligent eyes. When Jake finished, he mounted his horse and began to leave, but the dog followed him. "Go away," Jake said. "I don't need company." But the dog kept following, for miles, until Jake finally sighed and stopped. "All right, you win, but if you're staying with me, you need a name." Jake looked at the animal black as night. "Shadow, I'll call you Shadow." The dog wagged its tail for the first time, and Jake smiled too for the first time in months. Since then, Shadow had been his constant companion. The dog was intelligent, loyal, and had an incredible instinct for danger. More than once, Shadow had alerted Jake about snakes, storms, or men with bad intentions. Jake never admitted it out loud, but Shadow had become his only family, the only living being Jake cared about. It was an August morning when Jake and Shadow left Tombstone. Jake had worked on a ranch for 3 months and saved enough money. It was time to move on. He rode Diablo, his brown horse, with Shadow trotting alongside. The plan was to reach Tucson, work a few more months, and then, well, Jake never planned much beyond that. The road crossed the Arizona desert, a cruel, unforgiving place where the sun seemed to have a personal hatred for anything alive. Jake carried plenty of water, both for himself and for Shadow and Diablo. It was noon on the second day of travel when Shadow began acting strangely. The dog stopped suddenly in the middle of the road, the ears erect, the neck fur bristling. A low growl came from its throat. "What is it, Shadow?" Jake asked, stopping Diablo. He looked around but saw nothing, just the empty desert, shimmering in the heat. Shadow continued growling, staring straight ahead. Jake felt his instincts kick in. Shadow never acted like this without reason. His hand went to the Colt .45 revolver he wore on his belt, and then he saw her. A figure appeared on the dusty road ahead, stumbling. A young woman, no more than 20 years old, wearing a tattered dress stained with what looked like dried blood. In her arms, she held a bundle wrapped in dirty rags. Jake's heart sank. He had seen this before, the aftermath of bandit attacks on travelers. Jake pulled the reins carefully. Diablo shifted nervously. Shadow's growl intensified, the dog refusing to approach. "Easy, Shadow," Jake said, but he kept his guard up. The dog's instincts had saved his life more than once. The woman stumbled toward him, her legs barely holding her up. Her face was sunburned, lips cracked and bleeding, covered in dirt and dried tears. She looked like she'd been walking for days without water. "Sir," she called out, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Please, sir." She collapsed to her knees in the dust, still clutching the bundle. Jake dismounted slowly, his hand never leaving his revolver. Shadow stayed back, still growling low. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Jake called out, keeping distance. "What happened?" The woman looked up at him with desperate eyes. "Bandits. They attacked our wagon 3 days ago, killed my husband, my father, took everything." Her voice broke. "My baby. She's sick. Fever. Please, we need help." Jake's soldier instincts were screaming warnings. Something felt wrong about this situation. First, there was no wagon in sight, no tracks, no signs of any other people. Second, 3 days in the August desert without water. She should be dead. Third, the bundle she held didn't move, didn't make any sound. "Where did this attack happen?" Jake asked carefully. "North," she pointed vaguely. "Miles back. And you've been walking since then, with a sick baby? No water?" She nodded frantically. Yes, please. Do you have water, medicine?" Jake's hand tightened on his revolver. "Ma'am, I need you to show me what's in that bundle." The woman's expression changed instantly. The desperation vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Sir," she said, her voice now steady and different, "what is our price? My daughter and I. We have nothing. We'll work for you. Be your servants. Whatever you want. Just name your price." Jake took a step back. "Slavery's been illegal for over 15 years, ma'am." "I'm not talking about slavery," she said, standing up slowly. The weakness was gone. "I'm talking about survival. In this desert, everything has a price. Food, water, protection. What's ours?" Shadow's growl became a full bark now, aggressive and warning. The woman's eyes flickered to the dog with pure hatred for just a second before returning to Jake. That's when Jake understood. This wasn't a desperate mother. This was a trap. He scanned the landscape quickly, the rock formations about 50 yards to his right. Perfect for an ambush. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to unwrap that bundle, right now." The woman smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "I don't think so, cowboy." She whistled sharply. 4 men emerged from behind the rocks, rifles aimed at Jake. They were rough-looking bandits, the kind Jake had hunted for years. Desperate, dangerous men with nothing to lose. "Drop the gun, friend," the largest one called out. Nice and slow. Jake's mind raced. He was surrounded, outgunned. Shadow was barking furiously, but the dog knew better than to charge armed men. "Smart dog," the woman said, dropping all pretense now. She tossed the bundle aside. It was just rags, no baby. "We've been working this road for 6 months. Desperate woman, sick child, kind-hearted cowboys stopped to help. And then," she gestured to the bandits, "we take everything. Horse, supplies, money. Usually we let them walk away. Sometimes we don't." "You're Sadie Hawkins," Jake said, recognition dawning. He'd heard about her gang, a woman who used distress as bait while her men robbed travelers. "There's a $500 bounty on you," Sadie laughed. "Not anymore, there isn't. I'm worth 2,000 now, but you won't be collecting." Jake's hand was still on his revolver, but 4 rifles beat 1 pistol any day. "What's it going to be?" Sadie asked. "Give us everything and walk away, or die here and we take it anyway." Shadow was positioned between Jake and the bandits, teeth bared. Jake thought fast. He was outnumbered, but he had advantages, years of combat experience, a loyal dog who could move faster than men could aim, and the element that the bandits didn't expect. He wasn't just some cowboy. He was a former soldier and bounty hunter who had survived situations worse than this. "I'll give you 1 chance," Jake said calmly. "Ride away now, all of you, or this ends badly." The bandits laughed. "For you," the big one said, raising his rifle. That's when Jake made his move. He dove behind Diablo, using the horse as cover. At the same instant, he gave Shadow the command he'd taught him years ago. "Attack left. Shadow launched himself at the nearest bandit, 30 kilos of fur and teeth hitting the man's gun arm just as he fired. The shot went wild. Jake rolled, came up shooting. His first bullet caught the big bandit in the shoulder. His second hit another in the leg. Chaos erupted. Diablo bolted, running for safety. The bandits were firing wildly, trying to hit Jake while avoiding shooting each other, but Jake was moving, using years of combat training. He fired his remaining 4 shots precisely, methodically. One bandit went down clutching his stomach. Another fell with a bullet in his chest. The big bandit was still standing, despite his wounded shoulder. He was aiming at Shadow. "No!" Jake shouted. He threw himself forward, tackling the man just as he fired. The bullet hit the ground where Shadow had been a second before. Jake and the bandit wrestled in the dust, fighting for control of the rifle. Jake was smaller, but faster, using his combat training. He got the rifle away and smashed it across the man's face. Once, twice, the bandit went limp. Jake stood, breathing hard, checking his surroundings. 3 bandits were down, bleeding, but alive. The 4th had run. And Sadie, she was trying to reach a horse that was tied behind the rocks. "Don't," Jake said, aiming his empty revolver at her. She didn't need to know it was empty. Sadie froze, then slowly raised her hands. "You're making a mistake, cowboy. We can work together, split the profits from other travelers." "I don't profit from hurting innocent people anymore," Jake said. He whistled and Shadow came running back, limping but alive. "Those days are behind me." Jake quickly reloaded his revolver with bullets from his belt, then checked on Shadow. The dog had a gash on his front leg, but was otherwise okay. "You'll pay for this," Sadie spat. "My brother runs with the Clanton gang. They'll hunt you down." "Let them try," Jake said. He tied up the bandits who were still alive, using rope from their own supplies. Then he found what he was looking for, a small wagon hidden behind the rocks, filled with stolen goods, money, jewelry, supplies. The profits from months of robbing travelers. And something else, documents, letters, including wanted posters. Jake found a letter addressed to the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson, detailing the gang's operations. Someone had been investigating them. He also found something that made his blood run cold, a list of names, travelers who hadn't been allowed to walk away. 12 names, 12 murdered victims. Jake looked at Sadie with disgust. "You're not just a thief, you're a killer." "Survival," Sadie said coldly. "In this desert, it's kill or be killed." "No," Jake said. "That's just what monsters tell themselves to justify being monsters." He loaded the wounded bandits into their own wagon, tied Sadie securely, and retrieved Diablo, who had stopped about half a mile away. Then, with Shadow limping beside him, Jake began the slow journey back toward the nearest town. Not Tucson, but a small settlement called Benson, about 15 miles east. It took most of the day. Jake used the bandits' own water supplies to keep them and himself hydrated. Shadow walked beside the wagon, keeping watch. As they traveled, Jake couldn't stop thinking. He'd broken his vow. He'd shot men again. True, it was self-defense. True, they would have killed him without hesitation, but he'd still pulled the trigger, still watched men fall. And the worst part, it had felt natural, easy, like falling back into old, comfortable habits. "I'm trying to be better," Jake said to Shadow as they walked, "but maybe some things you can't escape. Maybe some sins stay with you forever." Shadow looked up at him with those intelligent yellow eyes. When they reached Benson, the town sheriff was shocked. Jake turned over Sadie and her gang, along with all the evidence of their crimes. "You're Jake Morrison, aren't you?" the sheriff asked, examining Jake's face. "The bounty hunter. Heard you retired." "I did," Jake said. "This was self-defense." The sheriff looked at the bandits, then at Jake. "Well, there's a $2,000 reward for Sadie Hawkins, plus smaller bounties on the others. You just earned yourself about $3,000, Mr. Morrison." Jake looked at the money the sheriff was counting out. $3,000. More than he'd make in 3 years of ranch work. Blood money, just like the old days. "Keep 500, Jake said. "For the town, for the victims' families if you can find them." and send 1,000 to the U.S. Marshal in Tucson. There was someone investigating this gang. They deserve compensation." "And the rest?" the sheriff asked. Jake thought about Elena Torres, the real survivor he'd found days later in his original timeline, about Celeste Rousseau and Marie-Claire, about all the people in this harsh land who needed help and had no one to turn to. "I'll think of something," Jake said. That night, Jake got a room at the local boarding house. He cleaned Shadow's wound properly, fed the dog, and sat on the edge of his bed thinking. He'd killed again today. Not 4 men, they'd survive, go to trial, probably hang for murder. But he'd shot them, brought violence back into his life. Was he sliding back into being the man he'd tried to leave behind? Jake looked at his hands. They were steady, no shaking, no visible blood, though he could still feel it there. "I'm trying to be good," he said to the empty room. "But this world keeps pulling me back." The next morning, Jake was preparing to leave when a young woman approached him in the street. She was maybe 22, plain-looking, nervous. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm Lucy Brennan. I heard what you did. Stopping the Hawkins gang. Just did what needed doing, ma'am. My brother," she continued, tears in her eyes. "His name was Thomas Brennan. He disappeared on this road 8 months ago. We thought maybe he just moved on, but—" She pulled out a piece of paper, one of the documents Jake had given to the sheriff. "His name is on the list." Jake felt his chest tighten. Thomas Brennan, number 7 on the list of murdered travelers. "I'm sorry for your loss," Jake said quietly. Lucy wiped her tears. "The sheriff said you're giving money to victims' families. I don't want money. I want justice. I want them to hang for what they did to Tommy." "They will," Jake promised. "The evidence is solid. They'll stand trial." "Good," Lucy said. Then she looked at him intently. "Mr. Morrison, this territory needs men like you, men who stand up to evil, who protect people. The law is stretched thin out here. Towns like Benson, like Tucson, they need protection." "I'm not a lawman anymore," Jake said. "Maybe not," Lucy replied. "But you're still a good man. Don't let what you had to do yesterday make you think otherwise. You saved lives." "Including mine. I travel this road once a month for supplies. I could have been next." After she left, Jake sat on a bench outside the boarding house, Shadow lying at his feet. Lucy's words echoed in his mind. "You saved lives." Maybe that was the answer. Maybe he couldn't completely escape violence in this violent land, but he could choose who he used it against. He could choose to protect, instead of just profit. "What do you think, Shadow?" Jake asked. "Can a man who's done bad things still do good, or is he tainted forever?" Shadow placed his head on Jake's knee, looking up with those wise yellow eyes. Jake made a decision. He went back to the sheriff's office. "That reward money, most of it. I want to use it to help this town, maybe hire a couple of deputies, fix up the jail, whatever helps keep people safe." The sheriff stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. This territory needs protection. I can't be everywhere, but maybe I can help make one town safer." Over the next week, Jake used the bounty money to do just that. He hired 2 young men as deputies and trained them properly. He bought supplies for the jail. He even purchased a decent wagon for the town doctor. Word spread quickly. Other towns heard about what happened in Benson, about the lone cowboy who stopped a murderous gang and then used the reward money to help the community. Job offers started coming in. Town councils wanting to hire him as sheriff. Rich ranchers wanting protection. Even the U.S. Marshal's office sent a letter asking if he'd consider coming out of retirement. But Jake turned them all down. "I'm not going back to that life," he told anyone who asked. "I'll help when I can, defend myself when I must, but I'm not going back to hunting men for money." 2 weeks after the incident, Jake finally left Benson, heading for Tucson again. Shadow walked beside Diablo, fully healed now. As they traveled, Jake thought about everything that had happened. He'd faced a test, fallen into a trap set by killers who preyed on compassion, and he'd survived not just with violence, but with his principles intact. He'd shot men, yes, but in self-defense, And he'd used the blood money to help others instead of keeping it. Maybe redemption wasn't about never making mistakes again. Maybe it was about what you did after, how you tried to make things right. The desert stretched ahead, endless and harsh. But Jake wasn't running anymore. He was moving forward with purpose. It was almost sunset when Jake saw something in the distance. A small camp, a covered wagon, a small fire, a family. As he got closer, he saw it clearly. A man and woman, 2 young children. Their wagon had a broken wheel. The man saw Jake approaching and stood up nervously, hand on a rifle. Can't blame him. Alone in the desert, strangers were dangerous. "Evening," Jake called out, stopping at a respectful distance. "Saw you got wagon trouble. I'm a carpenter by trade. Worked enough ranches to know how to fix a wheel. Happy to help if you need it." The man relaxed slightly. "That'd be mighty kind of you, stranger. Name's William Cooper. This is my wife Margaret and our kids." Jake dismounted. "Jake Morrison. This here's Shadow." Shadow walked forward calmly, and the children laughed as the dog let them pet him. Over the next hour, Jake fixed the wagon wheel. William offered payment, but Jake refused. "Just pass it forward," Jake said. "Help the next person you find who needs it." As Jake prepared to leave, young Lucy Cooper, maybe 6 years old, ran up to him. "Mr. Jake," she said shyly, "thank you for helping us." Jake knelt down to her level. "You're welcome, Lucy." "Are you a hero?" the little girl asked. Jake thought about that question, about all the men he'd killed, about the blood on his hands, about the good he was trying to do now. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm trying to be a good man. And sometimes that's enough." As Jake rode away into the sunset with Shadow beside him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because his past was erased, not because he was forgiven for everything he'd done, but because he was finally moving in the right direction. The desert was still harsh. The world was still violent. Evil men like Sadie Hawkins still existed. But so did good people like the Cooper family, like Lucy Brennan, who wanted justice for her brother, like the sheriff in Benson trying to keep his town safe. And maybe, just maybe, Jake Morrison could be counted among the good people now. Not a hero, not a saint, just a man with a loyal dog, trying to do right by the world that had given him so many chances to be better. Sometimes that's all any of us can be, and sometimes that's enough. In the weeks that followed, Jake continued toward Tucson. He worked odd jobs, helped where he could, and kept his head down. He didn't look for trouble, but he didn't run from it either. One afternoon in Tucson, Jake was having a drink in a saloon when he overheard a conversation. "Heard the Hawkins gang got caught," one man said. "Good riddance," another replied. "They say some lone cowboy took on 5 of them single-handed." "I heard it was 10, a third man chimed in. "And that he donated all the reward money to charity." Jake smiled quietly into his whiskey. Stories always got bigger in the telling. But then he heard something that made him sit up straight. "Trials next week. They're gonna hang, all of them. Judge said it's the most clear-cut case of murder and robbery he's ever seen. Justice, real justice, for Thomas Brennan and the other 11 victims." Jake finished his drink and walked out into the Tucson evening. Shadow was waiting outside, and together they walked to the edge of town, where they'd camped. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in oranges and purples, Jake thought about Sarah, his little sister who'd disappeared all those years ago. He'd never found out what happened to her, never got his justice. But today, 12 other families got theirs, and maybe that meant something. "Hey, Shadow," Jake said, scratching the dog behind the ears. "I think we're going to stay around Tucson for a while. This seems like a good town. Could use a carpenter or a ranch hand. Something honest." Shadow barked in agreement. "And if trouble comes looking for us," Jake continued, "well, we'll handle it. Together." The dog's tail wagged. Jake looked out at the desert one more time. He'd crossed it running from his past. But now he was standing still, ready to build a future. No ghosts, no demons, no supernatural evil. Just a man, a dog, and the choices they made every day. And in the harsh reality of the Old West, that was its own kind of miracle. 3 months later, Jake had settled into Tucson properly. He'd found work as a ranch hand on a respectable spread outside town, and he'd even started seeing a woman, a widow named Catherine, who ran the general store. Life was normal, quiet, good. But Jake couldn't quite shake the feeling that his past wasn't done with him yet. One evening, a U.S. Marshal rode up to the ranch where Jake was working. "Jake Morrison?" the marshal asked. "That's me." The marshal dismounted. "Name's Thomas Grant. I've been looking for you. Got a proposition." Jake tensed. "I'm retired from that life, Marshal." "Hear me out," Grant said. "You know this territory well. You know the criminal element. And you proved in Benson that you can handle yourself. I need someone to help track down the Clanton gang. They've been terrorizing towns from here to the Mexican border." Jake shook his head. "Find someone else." "The Hawkins gang," Grant continued. "Sadie's brother Jeremiah. He's with the Clantons now, and he's sworn revenge against you. Says he's going to find you and kill you slowly. Torture that dog of yours first, make you watch." Shadow, who was lying nearby, lifted his head. Jake felt anger flare in his chest. Threats against him were one thing. Threats against Shadow were another entirely. "So you've got a choice," Grant said. "Wait for them to come to you, innocent people getting hurt along the way, or help me stop them now." Jake was silent for a long moment. "One job," he finally said. "I help you take down the Clantons, and then I'm done." "Truly done," Grant nodded. "One job, you have my word. When do we leave?" "Dawn tomorrow." That night, Jake told Catherine about the marshal's offer. She wasn't happy, but she understood. "You're a good man, Jake Morrison," she said. "But you carry violence with you like a shadow. Maybe you need to face it one more time before you can truly let it go." "Maybe," Jake agreed. The next morning, Jake kissed Catherine goodbye, promised he'd return, and rode out with Marshal Grant and a small posse. The hunt for the Clanton gang took 2 weeks. They tracked them through the desert, through small towns, always one step behind, until finally they caught up. The Clantons had taken over an abandoned ranch, using it as their base. 7 men, all armed and dangerous, including Jeremiah Hawkins, Sadie's brother. Grant wanted to wait for more backup, but Jake knew better. They'll see reinforcements coming. They'll scatter. It's now or never. The marshal looked at his small posse. Just 5 men, including Jake, against 7 hardened outlaws. "Terrible odds," Grant muttered. "I've faced worse," Jake said, thinking of the war, of Benson, of everything he'd survived. They struck at dawn, surrounding the ranch. Grant called out for the outlaws to surrender. Their answer was gunfire. The battle was intense but brief. Jake moved like he was back in the war, efficient, deadly, focused. He took down 2 outlaws without killing them, aiming for legs and shoulders. Shadow attacked another, bringing him down. When the smoke cleared, 5 outlaws were captured alive. 1 was dead, caught in crossfire, and 1 had escaped. Jeremiah Hawkins. "He's heading for Tucson," one of the captured outlaws said, blood running from a shoulder wound. "He knows you live there now, Morrison. Said he's gonna burn down that general store with your woman inside." Jake's blood turned to ice. "Go," Grant said. "We'll handle these prisoners. Save your woman." Jake didn't need to be told twice. He mounted Diablo and rode harder than he ever had, Shadow running beside him. It was a 6-hour ride to Tucson. Jake made it in 4, nearly killing his horse in the process. He arrived just as smoke was rising from the general store. Jeremiah Hawkins stood in the street, a torch in his hand, laughing as flames consumed the building. "Morrison!" he shouted when he saw Jake. "How's it feel? How's it feel to lose everything?" Jake's vision went red. He drew his revolver, but then he heard something. A cough from inside the store. Catherine, she was still inside. Jake had a choice. Shoot Jeremiah now, get revenge, or save Catherine. It wasn't really a choice at all. Jake holstered his gun and ran into the burning building. Shadow started to follow, but Jake commanded him to stay. Inside was an inferno. Smoke filled his lungs, heat seared his skin. But Jake pushed forward, following the sound of coughing. He found Catherine in the back room, trapped under a fallen beam. Jake lifted with all his strength, adrenaline giving him power he didn't know he had. "I've got you," he said, pulling her free. He carried her out just as the building's roof started to collapse. They emerged into the street, both coughing, covered in soot. Jeremiah was still there, reloading his gun, ready to finish them both. But he never got the chance. Shadow launched himself at Jeremiah, 30 kilos of fury. The outlaw's gun fired wild as he fell, the bullet going harmlessly into the sky. By the time Jake caught his breath, townspeople had arrived. The sheriff arrested Jeremiah. The doctor was checking Catherine. "She'll be fine," the doctor said. "Smoke inhalation, some burns, but she'll recover." Jake sat in the dirt, Shadow pressed against his side, and watched the store burn. Everything Catherine owned, gone. "I'm sorry," Jake said when she was conscious enough to talk. "This is my fault. My past caught up with me and hurt you." Catherine coughed, then managed a weak smile. "It's just a building, Jake. Buildings can be rebuilt. You saved my life. That's what matters." But Jake couldn't shake the guilt. Everywhere he went, violence followed. Everyone he cared about got hurt. Maybe he was cursed. Maybe some people just carried darkness with them forever. Over the next few weeks, Jake helped Catherine rebuild. He used the last of his savings. He worked day and night. The town pitched in too. Catherine was well loved. Jeremiah Hawkins was tried and hanged alongside his sister and the rest of the Clanton gang. Justice was served. Marshal Grant offered Jake a permanent position. Good pay, respect, a chance to do real good. Jake turned him down. "I'm done, Marshal. Truly done this time. Every time I pick up a gun, someone gets hurt. Catherine almost died because of me. I can't keep doing this." "You saved her," Grant pointed out. "You stopped bad men from hurting more innocent people. That's not nothing, Morrison." "Maybe," Jake said, "but the cost is too high. I'm hanging up my guns for good." And he meant it. Jake gave his revolver to the sheriff, keeping only a rifle for hunting. He focused entirely on honest work, carpentry, ranch hand jobs, anything that didn't involve violence. Months passed. The store was rebuilt. Catherine recovered fully. Life returned to normal. Jake asked Catherine to marry him. She said yes. On their wedding day, Jake stood at the altar with Shadow sitting beside him as his best man, or best dog, and felt truly happy for the first time in years. His past wasn't erased. The blood on his hands didn't wash away. The faces of men he'd killed still haunted his dreams. But he was building something new, something good, a life worth living. "Do you, Jake Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do," Jake said without hesitation. As he kissed his bride, with Shadow barking happily and the townspeople cheering, Jake realized something important. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about becoming a different person. It was about choosing every single day to do better than yesterday. He'd been a soldier, a bounty hunter, a killer, but now he was a husband, a carpenter, a friend, a protector when needed, but not a hunter. And that made all the difference. Jake Morrison lived in Tucson for the rest of his life. He and Catherine had 3 children. He built a successful carpentry business. He helped his neighbors, defended the weak when necessary, but never again hunted men for money. Shadow lived to be 15 years old, dying peacefully in his sleep in front of the fireplace in Jake's home. Jake buried him on a hill overlooking the desert they'd crossed together so many years ago. When Jake himself died at age 68, the whole town attended his funeral. He was remembered not for the men he'd killed or the violence in his past, but for the good he'd done. The lives he'd saved, the family he'd raised, the honest work of his hands. His tombstone read simply, "Jake Morrison, 1846-1914, husband, father, friend. He chose to be better." And in the end, that choice was the most important thing he ever did. The Old West was a harsh, violent place. It took good people and ground them down. It rewarded cruelty and punished kindness, but it also gave second chances to those brave enough to take them. Jake Morrison took his second chance. He built a life worth living. He proved that a man could change, could choose good over evil, compassion over violence. And sometimes that's the greatest victory of all, not defeating monsters, but refusing to become one yourself.